TrueStory Vibes warmly welcomes all our beloved listeners. We're so glad to see you again in our familiar time slot.
Today,
TrueStory Vibes brings you a brand new story, one that we hope will touch your heart and stay with you. As you listen, feel free to leave a comment sharing the quote or moment that left the deepest impression on you. Wishing you a wonderful and meaningful listening experience. Seren Vale's world narrowed to the steady drip of fluid and the sterile hum of the monitor in room 312 at Nova Springs Medical Center. Outside, the late afternoon sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the hospital corridor. Inside, time had ceased to move. Seren's grip on the small plastic chair arm tightened until her knuckles blanched, the faint squeak echoing her mounting panic. It had been less than an hour since Orion, her bright-eyed 5-year-old, was wheeled into emergency trauma with a critical head injury. One moment he'd been chasing fireflies in their backyard, giggling as the evening mist rolled in. The next, he'd taken that fateful fall. Now, under a drip of blood, his tiny chest rose and fell with the effort of someone twice his age. She'd watched the doctors disappear behind the swinging double doors of the trauma bay. Dr. Emery first, then Dr. Graham. And finally Dr. Emmerich, the only one she'd never seen before. Each returned with the same hurried, grave expression. Each time, her heart lurched with desperate hope. They'll say it's okay. They'll say he's going to live. But the faces told her otherwise. A soft knock at the doorframe drew her gaze. Dr. Emmerich's silhouette paused in the fluorescent light as if steeling himself. Seren pushed to her feet, her legs trembling like autumn leaves in a wind gust. "Doctor, is he?" Her voice cracked, a single raw note of fear and hope. Dr. Emmerich stepped fully inside. His lab coat was buttoned neatly, his salt and pepper hair combed back, but his eyes held an unspoken sorrow. He slid off his glasses, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "Mrs. Vale," he said quietly. The words fell like stones. "I'm so sorry, we did everything we could, but your son didn't make it." Silence roared in Seren's skull. The monitor's beeping became a frantic drumbeat. She stared at him, mouth open, as if the shock might solidify into something sensible. No, that can't be right. He has to be okay." The chair screeched behind her as she spun, running toward the closed doors. "He has to be okay," she whispered, voice trembling. "Please, just tell me he's alive." Her legs gave way when the surgeon shook his head, unable even to meet her eyes. "I'm sorry," he whispered, more to himself than to her. Seren felt the world tilt, her world, a mother's world, cracking at the seams. She fell to the floor, tears pouring freely as she sobbed. The life that had filled the hospital room drained away. Nurses from the station rushed in. One knelt beside Seren, wrapping a warm blanket around her shoulders. Another picked up her trembling hand, gently squeezing. But Seren barely registered them. Her vision blurred, and all she could see was Orion's child-sized sneakers, still by the trolley where they'd stripped away his blood-soaked shirt. Time stretched. A social worker guided Seren to a private consultation room. She sat at the edge of a beige sofa that felt as cold as stone, hugging the blanket tighter. Words of comfort washed over her, but Seren no longer heard them. She stared at a framed print of a sunrise on the wall, wondering how a new dawn could ever arrive. Hours later, Seren allowed herself to be led back to Orion's room. The trauma bay lay silent,
cleaned and reset.
His tiny body, now wrapped in a soft white sheet, lay peacefully on the bed. His face was angelic, untouched by the frantic violence of moments before. Seren approached, every step heavy with dread and heartbreak. Leaning over, she touched his forehead, memorizing its warmth. She smoothed his hair, inhaling the faint scent of baby shampoo and antiseptic. His eyelashes fluttered as if in a dream. Seren pressed her lips to his cool cheek, her voice a broken whisper. "I'm here, baby. I'm so sorry." In that moment, the noise of the world fell away. There was no tomorrow, only this crushing present. Seren clung to Orion until her arms ached, until the nurses gently urged her that she deserved rest. But rest was impossible. Instead, she paced the corridor all night, illuminated by exit signs and the hum of fluorescent lights, each step echoing the emptiness in her heart. When dawn finally broke, painting the sky in soft pastels, Seren remained by Orion's side, refusing to let go. The sun rose on a world forever altered. And though the light promised new beginnings for many, for Seren Vale it shone on an abyss of loss she feared might never heal. Yet even in the depths of her grief, a single thought flickered at the edge of her mind. She would fight for her son's memory, for justice, and for the fragile hope that one day her shattered heart might learn to live again. Seren Vale returned home in a haze of grief, her body too numb to feel the sting of the autumn chill. Yet within the walls of the Bennett penthouse, she was greeted not by comfort, but by the cold glare of her husband, Maverick Thorne. At 35, he was at the apex of power, handsome in a sculpted way, eyes like polished steel, but his heart was shuttered behind layers of ambition. He regarded her with the same calculated distance he showed all business rivals. Their marriage had never been one of love. It had been arranged amid courthouse gossip and boardroom machinations. Seren, a woman with nebulous family ties, brought in to seal a real estate merger between the Thorne Empire and the Vale Foundation. Rumors whispered that Seren had carried Maverick's child following an evening she couldn't fully recall, her memories blurred by champagne and the heavy scent of his cologne. By the time morning light revealed her swollen belly, she found herself bound by a contract forged in boardroom coldness. Maverick had never hidden his disdain. He refused even to learn their son's nursery rhyme, delegating parenthood to nannies while he attended charity galas in tailored tuxedos. Seren had watched, heart heavy, as each month passed and her son grew, craving the embrace Maverick refused to give. Orion's laughter, once bright as carnival lights, became the only warmth left in a gilded cage.
Now,
in the wake of Orion's death, Seren faced Maverick again, this time with eyes rimmed crimson and voice raw as breaker waves. "How could you let this happen?" she demanded, words trembling with a grief he could neither understand nor feign. Maverick's lips thinned. "It was an accident," he said, as though reciting a bottom-line clause. "Claire's negligence. Nothing to do with me." He checked messages on his phone, posture rigid, dismissing her anguish as a liability. Seren's hands clenched at her sides. "No," she shot back. "You refused to lift a finger when he needed you. You left him alone with her, your mistress. You abandoned your son." He looked up then, flicking a strand of silver-tipped hair back from his forehead. "This conversation is over," he said coldly. "I have a board meeting in 30. She stood frozen, disbelief warring with fury. In that exchange lay the truth of their union. No vows of support, no promises to cherish. It had been a transaction. Her body, her womb, and now her broken heart, all collateral in a corporate gamble. Night fell around the penthouse, but Seren's world remained bathed in harsh, fluorescent memory. She paced the grand living room, oaks of shadow crossing the marble floors. The trophies of Maverick's success, silver sculptures, commissioned paintings, felt like verdicts against her, a testament to his empire, a silent mockery of her loss. Memories of better days flickered, Orion's first laugh, his toddler footsteps echoing down the hallway, the soft hum of lullabies. Then Claire's betrayal in the kitchen, a scuffle that ended with a cracked teacup, blood on the floor, and a callous shrug. By the time the ambulance arrived, Maverick had slipped out to catch his private jet, too precious to soil his tailor-made suits with tragedy. Scraps of legal fine print haunted Seren's thoughts, joint custody, postnatal support, boilerplate clauses that left her penniless and alone. She discovered, with icy dread, that the prenup forbade any spousal claim beyond child support Maverick had always contested. She was trapped, wife in name only, mother bereft of both child and husband's compassion, with no power to enforce her rights. Yet beneath her devastation, a spark ignited. Seren realized that if Maverick would not fight for justice, she would. She would not allow Orion's death to be swept under the red carpet of high society secrets. As she slid into bed, empty beside her, she made a silent vow. She would expose every lie he told, every deal he hid, until his empire trembled. The next morning, Seren awoke with purpose steely as her son's tiny handprints etched into her heart forever. She would transform from a pawn into a queen of her own design. No longer Seren Vale, the compliant wife, she would become Sage Nolan, avenger for Orion, scourge to the man who valued profit over a son's life. And she would begin her campaign where the world could see, at Golden Bridge Plaza, under the brightest lights of high-stakes power. The late summer air in the Vale, Thorn backyard was thick with cicada song as 5-year-old Orion chased bubbles drifting from the ornate fountain. Seren Vale sat on a wrought iron bench, half watching her son whirl past, half lost in the vertigo of grief that had taken root in her heart. The horrors of the hospitals still clung to her, Orion's frightened eyes, the surgeon's furrowed brows, yet she forced herself to remember the simple joy of this very moment. Across the lawn, in the shadow of a towering magnolia, stood Vesper Quinn. Tall, willowy, with midnight black hair and high-fashion sensibilities, Vesper was the kind of woman whose mere presence seemed to rearrange the air around her. Seren never wanted her anywhere near Orion. But Vesper had invited herself to a garden party held in Orion's honor, a thinly veiled attempt to insinuate herself into the Bennett fold. Maverick had acquiesced for the sake of appearances. Seren had dared not protest. Seren rose as Orion tripped over the fountain stone rim and nearly fell. His small body teetered, his arms windmilled. Seren called out, "Orion!" But her voice caught in her throat. In one fluid motion, Vesper stepped forward, ostensibly to help. She extended a polished hand, her painted nails a bright slash of crimson. Orion reached for it then, almost imperceptibly, Vesper yanked him sideways. Seren's heart lurched. "No," she screamed, but her voice was swallowed by the chirp of cicadas and the distant hum of traffic. Orion lost his balance, time slow-emoed. His sneakers scraped the marble rim, his head arced back, eyes wide. He flailed once, twice, and then crashed to the flagstone patio. The world fractured. Guests gasped. White wine glasses shattered. Vesper froze, pale and trembling. Seren sprinted across the lawn, shrieking Orion's name, her heels clicking jagged rhythms. She reached her son as a twisted pool of blood blossomed beneath his head. "Call an ambulance," she screamed at no one in particular. Neighbors grabbed phones. A butler dashed indoors. Another guest snatched up the bubble wand, hurling it aside. Seren sank to her knees, cradling Orion's limp body. He was conscious, eyes fluttering, a single tear tracing down his cheek. "Mommy, it hurts," he whimpered, voice thin and frightened. Seren pressed her hand to his forehead. It was hot, too hot. She felt for a pulse, rapid, erratic, and knew that every second counted. Sirens screamed on the street outside the wrought iron gates. Vesper stumbled forward. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, voice cracking. I didn't mean." Her words trailed into the haze of panic. Seren's tears fell onto Orion's cheek. "Stay with me, baby," she pleaded, pressing her lips to his. Her own taste of salt and terror. "Stay with me." The ambulance crew burst through the gates, paramedics sliding Orion onto a stretcher. Seren was bundled in alongside him, half conscious of their frantic questions. What happened? How long ago? Any loss of consciousness? She shook her head, unable to answer. They secured him, loaded him in, and doors slammed. The van lurched off, red and blue lights strobing against manicured hedges. Seren collapsed across the seat, clutching Orion's hand as though tethered to his life. Vesper, pale as a ghost, climbed in behind her, but Seren refused to meet her eyes. "You've killed him," she whispered, though she wasn't sure whether she addressed Vesper, Maverick, or fate itself. The ride to Nova Springs Medical Center was a blur. Seren felt each pothole, every jolt, amplify her dread. Orion moaned softly. "Mommy, scary." Seren stroked his hair. "I'm here, sweetheart. I'm right here." In the emergency bay, the world spun. Doctors and nurses swarmed Orion's stretcher. IVs were placed, oxygen masks fitted. Neurosurgeons' voices rang out in clipped jargon. Seren hovered at the edges, her blood pounding in her ears. Dr. Emmerich returned first, his jaw set. Seren braced herself. He suffered a displaced skull fracture and intracranial hemorrhage. Emmerich said, "We're taking him to, or now." The words were automatic, professional. Seren felt them like a blow. "No," she cried. "Please, tell me he'll live." Emmerich's eyes softened. "We'll do our best. Hang in there." He moved on to coordinate the surgical team as Orion was whisked away. Seren was left clutching a surgical gown handed to her. Vesper hovered behind, tears in her eyes, but Seren didn't notice. She shed her jacket, arms trembling as she donned the sterile green. Every motion felt surreal, slipping on booties, tying the gown, stepping toward the operating suite, the sliding doors parting to reveal Orion's small form beneath the bright halo lights. A scrub nurse placed a gloved hand on Seren's shoulder. "Go wait in the family room," she said gently. Seren nodded, numb. She found herself in a windowless waiting area. Walls painted a dull beige, chairs arranged in a tight row. A clock ticked loudly, marking each second of her agony. Outside, emergency lights flashed rhythmically. Seren closed her eyes, picturing Orion's grin, the way he'd wrap his tiny arms around her neck. Her breath caught. She focused on those memories to steady herself, clinging to hope like driftwood in a storm. Minutes passed, then hours. The surgical team emerged, faces solemn. Emmerich approached Seren, his posture rigid. Seren sprang up. "Is he?" she choked out. His head shook. "We did everything we could."
I'm so sorry.
The world collapsed again, the floor tipping, her knees buckling. Seren Vale's scream tore through the silent hall, raw, primal, unending. And in that moment, nothing mattered but the fragment of her broken heart, her bright boy, Orion, lost forever to one fateful, careless push. The hospital lights blurred with her tears as Seren crumpled to the floor, the echoes of her grief haunting every sterile corridor. Seren Vale's grief was a living thing, coiling through her chest like a serpent. In the days after Orion's surgery, days that had stretched longer than any calendar could contain, she drifted through life as if underwater. She barely ate, barely slept. Hours were spent replaying the moment of that fateful push, the sirens, the surgeon's hurried steps. Every mirror reflected not Seren's face, but a hollow vessel of sorrow. Late one night, she found herself on Luna Bridge, the same span where Orion had lost his footing in her nightmares. The silver moon lay low on the horizon, its reflection fractured on the dark river below. Seren's feet carried her to the railing as though guided by some unseen hand. The wind bit at her cheeks, and the city lights trembled behind her, distant and unreal. She stared down at the water, its surface roiling like a living thing. The river's cool breath whispered promises of release. Seren's fingers tightened on the railing's jagged iron. "Orion," she whispered to the darkness. Voice brittle. "I can't do this without you." Memories flooded in, his first steps, his clumsy laugh, the way he'd curl into her side after bedtime stories. Now, those moments were gone. Memories she could never reclaim except in shards of agony. A sob escaped her as she pressed her forehead to the cold metal. "I'm sorry," she choked. "I'm so sorry I failed you." A moment later, Seren climbed onto the narrow ledge. Her heart pounded, each beat a hammer of desperation. Below, the river beckoned, black and vast. She closed her eyes, inhaled deeply, and leaned forward. A strong hand clamped onto her upper arm, yanking her back onto the sidewalk. Seren gasped, mouth opening in startled terror, as the second hand, gloved and sure, helped haul her fully to safety. Panic and rage crashed through her. "Get your hands off me," she screamed, voice cracking. But two figures loomed over her. A tall man in a paramedic's jacket, dark hair streaked with silver, eyes fierce with concern, and a younger woman beside him, her auburn braids swinging, face pale but determined. Seren stared, confusion and anger warring on her features. "Ma'am, please breathe," the man said, voice low but urgent. "You're safe now." His tone brooked no argument. Seren shook her head, tears streaking down her cheeks. "You don't understand," she cried.
My son, he died.
"He died because of me." The woman knelt beside her, tugging Seren's hand gently.
You're not alone, she said.
"You have people who care. Let us help you." The man offered a first aid blanket from his paramedic kit. She wrapped it around Seren's shoulders. "I'm Dr. Vale Arden," he said, "and this is my sister, Lyra. We were on call and came by when we saw you on the ledge." Seren stared at Dr. Arden's calm, kind face. His credentials pinned to his coat proclaimed Nova Springs in crisp lettering. She blinked, uncertainty mingling with shame. I don't know what I'm doing," she admitted, voice hollow. Lyra placed a steady hand on Seren's back. "What you're feeling is real," she said softly. "Losing a child is the worst pain, but ending your life won't bring him back." Seren's shoulders shook as fresh tears fell. "I can't live without him," she sobbed. "He deserves a mother who protects him, not one who let him die." Vale knelt beside her, taking her other hand. "No one deserves that grief," he said gently. "But you're still here, and he's still your son. Even if he's in a different place now, he would want you to survive." Lyra folded her arms around Seren's trembling form. "We've both lost someone," she added quietly. "And we know how dark it gets. But there is light if you let us help you find it." Seren stared at their earnest faces, two strangers whose compassion cut through her despair. The moonlight glinted on their professional uniforms, doctor and paramedic, both dedicated to saving lives. She felt the blanket's warmth seep into her bones, a fragile comfort. The river's distant roar reminded Seren of her broken vow. She closed her eyes and let the sobs shake her body. Vale and Lyra stayed, unhurried, until her tears slowed to a steady rhythm. When she finally caught her breath, Vale spoke again. "We'll get you someplace safe," he said. "There's a quiet room in the ER for families in crisis. You can stay with us tonight." He offered a small smile that carried more empathy than words. Seren nodded numbly. Lyra helped her to her feet. Together, they walked back across the bridge. The sterile lights of Nova Springs Medical Center beckoned ahead, a promise of refuge instead of oblivion. In the waiting area, Lyra sat beside Seren, offering herbal tea. Vale spoke briefly with triage staff, arranging a private room. Seren accepted the tea with trembling fingers, sipping the bitter warmth that seemed to pulse life back into her veins. Later, as Seren lay on a cot in a softly lit consultation room, Dr. Arden checked her vitals with gentle efficiency. Lyra tucked a modest blanket around her. "You're safe here," Lyra said again. "We'll help you find your way forward." Seren closed her eyes, the weight of the past week pressing down. But for the first time since Orion's accident, she felt a flicker of something stronger than despair, connection. Two strangers had risked their shift to pull her from that ledge. Perhaps, she thought as exhaustion claimed her, she could find a reason to keep living. In the quiet that followed, Seren Vale drifted on the edge between darkness and dawn, no longer alone, cradled by the kindness of Dr. Vale Arden and his sister Lyra. The night's ordeal had spared her life. Now came the long road of reclaiming it, and for Orion's sake, she would learn to walk it. Morning light filtered through the gauzy curtains of Seren's private room in Nova Springs Medical Center. Dr. Vale Arden had insisted she stay another day for observation. Though her wounds were not physical, she sat at a small table, cradling a steaming cup of orange spice tea that Nurse Celeste had brought her. The blend, fresh squeezed orange, a hint of lemon peel, and an unexpected dash of sea salt, was oddly familiar. Seren paused mid-sip, the salty warmth catching her off guard. She stared at the mug's rim as memories flickered. Her grandmother's kitchen, a battered copper kettle, morning sun on a farmhouse porch, and that same salty tang in her mother's tea. But her own mother had vanished when Seren was 6. No funeral, no goodbye. Seren had grown up in Avalon House Orphanage, her earliest memories a jumble of pale walls and strangers' voices. Setting the cup down with trembling fingers, Seren realized the Arden family, Cale and Lyra, had offered her exactly that tea. She traced the rim, puzzled. Why would they know to add salt, she wondered. It was a tiny detail, but enough to make her heart quicken. Perhaps, she thought, this wasn't random kindness but something more. Later that afternoon, Cale knocked gently and entered, carrying an unsealed manila envelope. Seren, he began, voice soft, we've talked about your lineage, but I wanted to be certain. I hope you don't mind. He handed her the envelope. Inside was a single sheet, the results of a DNA analysis. Seren's breath hitched. Cale, did you? She stammered, voice barely above a whisper. I ran your sample against ours, Cale explained, gesturing to himself and Lyra, siblings through and through. The matching markers were undeniable. Seren, you're my sister. Seren's mind reeled. Images of her childhood flickered, each now tinged with new significance. She remembered the nursery rhyme Lyra had hummed to Orion's bedside only a day ago, a lullaby about 3 sisters whose hearts were bound together. She had dismissed it as a comforting refrain. Now its words echoed with irony. 3 hearts of fate entwined, though parted by the hands of time. She looked up at Cale, tears welling. How is this possible? My earliest memories are of the orphanage in Avalon. I never knew my family. Lyra entered then, carrying a worn leather photo album. She sat beside Seren and gently opened it. Inside were yellowed photographs of a summer fair at Avalon Mills, of 3 children laughing by a stone wall, 2 older siblings holding hands as a smaller girl chased butterflies. Cale and Lyra smiled down at the album's worn edges. That's us, Lyra said, voice trembling. From 20 years ago. She flipped a page to a faded snapshot, a toddler Seren in a faded pink dress, hair in pigtails, between a tall boy with unruly dark curls and a girl with auburn braid, Lyra herself. I remember seeing that photo in my dreams, Seren whispered, tracing the image with a fingertip. I never knew why. Lyra nodded. When you vanished at 6, our parents, Arden and Rose, couldn't find you. They searched every local agency, every orphanage. When the trail went cold, they kept hoping you'd turn up. We never stopped believing. Cale leaned forward. They passed away last year, Rose from illness, Arthur from a broken heart. In their wills, they left instructions to find you. Lyra and I swore to fulfill their last wish. That's how we found you. Seren closed the album, voice steady despite the whirlwind in her chest. So, it was their tea ritual that first told me I belonged here. She managed a faint smile. Grandma's salty orange tea. Lyra offered her the cup, still half full. Seren raised it in a trembling toast. To family, found at last. That evening, Seren walked with Lyra through the hospital's healing garden, a secluded courtyard of lavender and white birch trees. She carried the album, cradling it like a fragile heirloom. Cool air scented with pine, and the tang of healing herbs filled her lungs. How do you feel? Lyra asked, stepping alongside. Terrified, Seren admitted. It's like pulling at a loose thread under my skin. Everything unravels. Lyra stopped and hugged her sister tight. You don't have to face this alone. Seren leaned into the embrace, letting another wave of tears flow. I need to understand who I am and why I was taken from you. Lyra led Seren to a wrought iron bench. Grandma Rose used to tell us stories of ancient lineage, how our family was entrusted with protecting the Vale legacy, a foundation of goodwill for the city. When you were born, they feared you'd be in danger from those who wanted to seize their land. That's why they hid you. Seren's breath caught. My parents hid me. Because of money? Lyra nodded. They loved you too much to risk your safety. They hoped that once the threat passed, they could reclaim you. We believed they would. It explains so much and nothing, Seren said, voice tight. I grew up feeling abandoned. You were never abandoned, Kale said, appearing behind them. We were separated by fear and circumstances. But we never stopped looking. Together, the three siblings sat in the dimming garden, forging a new bond from the shards of lost time. Seren realized that her grief for Orion would forever be a part of her story. But now she had a family to lean on, two people who carried echoes of her past and promise for her future. Back in her room, Seren placed the photo album on the bedside table. She smoothed the old photographs, committing each face to memory. Tomorrow, she knew, would bring new challenges. Legal battles to claim her inheritance, truth-telling to Maverick's world, and the daunting task of rebuilding her life. But as she climbed into bed, Lyra and Kale at her door, she no longer faced her grief alone. Seren closed her eyes, the taste of salty orange tea lingering on her tongue. For the first time in years, she felt anchored, not by contracts or corporate schemes, but by the simple, enduring power of blood. The Vale legacy lived on in her veins, entwined now with the Arden line. And as sleep claimed her, Seren whispered into the quiet room, "Welcome home, Seren Vale Arden." The sterile glow of the therapy room was a far cry from the warmth of Seren's childhood memories, yet it was here that she would reclaim the past that had been stolen from her. Tall windows overlooked the hospital's healing garden, but the curtains remained drawn. Across from her sat Dr. Elena Dawson, a specialist in trauma and memory retrieval. Her gentle presence a bulwark against Seren's racing anxiety. They had begun weekly sessions 2 days after Seren discovered her family's identity. At first, each appointment felt like wading through molasses, slow, dreadful, as painful secrets lay buried beneath years of forced amnesia. That morning, Dr. Dawson guided Seren through deep breathing exercises, the room's white noise machine humming in the background, punctuated by Seren's inhales and exhales. "Let's begin," Dr. Dawson said softly. "We'll start with a gentle reminder. Your heart knows these memories belong to you. There's no rush." Seren closed her eyes. She visualized a childhood home glade where she once chased moths, her siblings' laughter echoing among oak trees. The imagery shimmered, but remained just out of reach. "Tell me what you see," Dr. Dawson prompted. "Sunlight dappled," Seren murmured. "My sister's voice, something about a lullaby." Then a dark corridor. Fear. Her brow furrowed, tears brimming. "It feels dangerous." Dr. Dawson nodded. "Stay with the feeling. Don't fight it." She began a low, rhythmic count. Seren felt her pulse slow, her breathing deepen. Painful fragments surfaced. The sharp crack of a wooden floorboard, a distant wail. The softness of a blanket that smelled of lavender. As the session progressed, Seren relived her disappearance at age 6, the night she'd wandered away from a cottage at Avalon Mills. Her parents and siblings frantic as she vanished into the night. She saw glowing lanterns bobbing down muddy paths, heard frantic shouts, then nothing, until she awoke days later in the orphanage. When she opened her eyes, heart pounding, Dr. Dawson offered her a cup of herbal tea. Seren wrapped her hands around its warmth, tears soaking her cheeks. "It's all real," she whispered. "I remember leaving them and then waking up alone." "That was the plan," Dr. Dawson said gently. "Your birth parents hid you to protect you from threats. They never wanted you to suffer again." Seren nodded, trembling. "I want to find those threats. I need justice for Orion and answers for my past." "Tomorrow we'll try hypnosis," Dr. Dawson offered. "It can help bridge gaps in memory." The next afternoon, Seren settled into a reclining leather chair in the hypnosis suite, walls painted a soothing blue. Soundscapes of distant waves whispering through hidden speakers. Dr. Dawson's voice guided her down a spiral of words designed to relax every muscle. "Imagine a staircase of 10 steps," she intoned. "With each number, you descend deeper into calm. 10, 9, 8. Seren felt as if she floated, weightless and untethered. At 1, she drifted into a waking dream.
Now, Dr.
Dawson's voice murmured. See yourself at 6 years old, playing outside. What do you notice? Seren's mind conjured a clearing edged by wildflowers. A younger version of herself sat on a wooden bench beside 2 older children, Lyra with her auburn braid, and tall, dark-crowned Kale. They offered her a small mug of orange spice tea. Its saltiness unexpected but oddly comforting. They're chanting your name, Dr. Dawson prompted gently. Seren heard spectral voices. Seren. Seren, her heart squeezed. Take their hands. Seren reached out in her mind, grasping the hands of her siblings. A wave of warmth coursed through her, bright as sunrise. She realized this memory was not just her own. It belonged to a family that had never forgotten her. Thank you, she whispered, voice thick. The hypnotic glow faded as she returned to full awareness, tears glistening in her eyes. Armed with this recovered certainty, Seren knew it was time to move forward. With Kale and Lyra at her side, she began piecing together the evidence she needed to bring Maverick Thorne to justice for Orion's death and the countless other crimes he'd committed. Their first stop was the penthouse security office. Kale, a licensed physician with hospital privileges, had arranged covert access for Seren under the guise of a family mental health check. Seren's heart raced as she hovered by the surveillance monitors, where footage from the day of Orion's accident was stored. Fast forward to 4:47 p.m., Kale directed. Seren watched the fuzzy video of Orion chasing Bubbles, then the subtle lunge of Vesper's hand, the moment of his fall. She paused frame by frame, capturing stills of Vesper's hand at Orion's waist just before he toppled. These are key, Seren said, steadying herself. But Vesper will claim it was accidental. Which is why we need Maverick's email login, Lyra said. She handed Seren a portable drive. I have access from your family account. He'll never suspect us. In Maverick's encrypted emails, Seren discovered veiled references to asset relocation and problematic heirs. One note from Maverick to his CFO, dated the morning after Orion's death, instructed. Ensure Claire's involvement remains confidential. No mention of my name. This is all her fault. Her hands shook as she copied the messages. He planned to scapegoat Vesper, she said in disbelief. He didn't care that it was his own child. They drove to a legal aid clinic where Lyra's friend, attorney Maya Chin, helped them secure the documents in an evidence binder, surveillance screenshots, email correspondences, and even medical billing records showing Maverick's lawyers disputing Seren's malpractice claims against Vesper. Maya frowned at the binder's heft. This is rock solid, she said. We can file a civil suit for wrongful death against both Vesper and Maverick. And criminal referrals to the district attorney for child endangerment, obstruction of justice, and conspiracy. Seren's pulse thundered. Let's do it, she said. For Orion, and for the family who was ripped apart. That evening, Seren reviewed her recovered memories, each detail fueling her resolve. In the hospital garden where she and Lyra once shared truths, Seren vowed to confront Maverick publicly. No more hidden boardroom deals, no more thorns of silence. She would expose him at Golden Bridge Plaza's high-stakes development hearing, live-streaming his crimes to the entire city. Kale and Lyra stood beside her on the garden bench, 2 solid pillars of support. Seren inhaled the warm night air, carrying the scent of jasmine and pine. For Orion, Seren said, voice firm. For Seren, Kale replied, taking her hand. And for our family, Lyra added, pressing Seren's arm. Together, they stepped into the future they would forge, one built on recovered memories, unwavering justice, and the unbreakable bonds of siblings reunited. Serene in her purpose, Seren Vale Arden prepared to bring down the man who had destroyed her past and her child's future, knowing that in their unity lay the power to right the greatest wrongs. The morning of the Golden Bridge Plaza development hearing dawned crisp and clear, a deceptive calm before Seren Vale Arden's storm. The gleaming glass towers of the plaza reflected sunlight in dazzling patterns, while an assembled crowd of reporters, city officials, and corporate executives buzzed with anticipation. Seren arrived alongside her siblings Kale and Lyra, flanked by attorney Maya Chen, her evidence binder clutched tightly in hand. Inside the grand conference hall, polished marble floors echoed with footsteps as attendees found their seats. At the dais sat the 5-member Development Oversight Committee, its chairs draped in navy velvet. Behind them, a massive screen displayed Golden Bridge Plaza bid hearing in bold letters. Maverick Thorne's law firm, Thorne and Prescott, had sent a representative instead of Maverick himself, citing a personal emergency. Seren felt a surge of satisfaction. He was forced to face his reckoning without his armor of confidence. Maya Chen approached the microphone at the podium. "Good morning," she began, voice steady. "I represent Ms. Seren Vale Arden. Today, we will present compelling evidence that Mr. Maverick Thorne's company engaged in criminal behavior, including wrongful death, obstruction of justice, and financial fraud." A murmur rose in the crowd. From her seat, Seren watched as the Oversight Committee's chair, Councilmember Wallace, raised an eyebrow. "Proceed," he said, tapping his gavel. Maya signaled to the AV technician. The massive screen flickered, then cut to a split view. On one side, surveillance footage from the Vale, Thorne estate, Orion chasing Bubbles, Vesper Quinn's hand at his waist, and his horrified tumble onto marble. On the other side, an email chain extracted from Maverick's account. Seren's heart pounded as Maya narrated. "Here's the recording of Orion's accident at 4:47 p.m. last August, clearly showing Ms. Quinn's deliberate pull. Yet Mr. Thorne's internal memo the very next morning reveals he sought to pin the blame entirely on Ms. Quinn, instructing his CFO to conceal any connection to his name." Gasps rippled through the hall. Reporters fumbled for their phones. Cameras zoomed in on Seren's face, resolute, unwavering despite the hush of shock. Maya clicked a remote. The screen switched to email excerpts. Subject: Asset relocation. Claire's involvement to remain confidential. No mention of my name. Liability must be contained. Signed M. Thorne. Councilmember Wallace's gavel rapped once. "Ms. Chen, are you alleging Mr. Thorne intentionally allowed a child to be harmed and then orchestrated a cover-up?" "Yes, Councilmember," Maya replied. "And we have medical invoices demonstrating that Thorne and Prescott's legal team contested Ms. Vale Arden's request for coverage of Orion's emergency care, effectively denying payment while hiding behind Vesper Quinn's alleged negligence." The next slide showed redacted invoices. Line items for air ambulance, neurosurgery, and pediatric ICU, annotated with claim denied pending investigation. Seren swallowed the lump in her throat. Every line represented the hours she'd spent at Orion's bedside, every denied charge a dagger in her heart. A reporter shouted, "Ms. Arden, what do you want from this hearing?" Seren rose, stepping to the microphone with Maya's nod. "My son Orion died because my ex-husband valued profit over a child's life," she said, her voice carrying across the silent hall. "I stand here today not only for Orion, but for every family whose tragedy is swept under the rug of corporate greed. I demand that Mr. Thorne be disqualified from this bid, that his company pay full reparations for his wrongdoings, and that he face the legal consequences of his deliberate actions." A murmur swelled into a cacophony as cameras clicked and officials whispered among themselves. Seren felt a tremor of fear. Was she safe? But Kale and Lyra flanked her, their presence a fortress. Maya brought up the final piece of evidence, a voice recording extracted from Vesper Quinn's phone. On the screen, a waveform pulsed as the audio played. Vesper, voice trembling. "He told me not to say his name," he said. "If this gets out, my entire empire collapses." And when the boy fell, he didn't rush back. He boarded a plane. In the hush that followed, the Oversight Committee chair put down his notes. "Mr. Prescott," he called to the empty seat at the table, "Mr. Thorne's representative, what do you say to these allegations?" The lawyer rose, smoothing his tie. "Councilmember, these so-called evidences are doctored. My client was nowhere near the estate at the time. Any suggestion otherwise is defamatory. He pivoted to his notes. As for the emails, we contest their authenticity and will produce counter-evidence. Councilmember Wallace frowned. We will verify authenticity. In the meantime, we will adjourn to review these materials. On the dais, cameras remained rolling. Seren stepped away from the podium, her knees weak. Reporters rushed her with questions, but she shook her head. Beside her, Lyra wrapped an arm around her shoulders. Beyond the courtroom doors, media trucks lined Golden Bridge Plaza's grand steps. News anchors spoke urgently into cameras. In a stunning turn of events, Seren Vale Arden presented surveillance footage and emails implicating real estate mogul Maverick Thorne in the cover-up of his son's fatal accident. Seren climbed into Cale's black SUV, heart still pounding. The city's skyline stretched before her, a glittering testament to ambition. But today, she had pierced its veneer. As the SUV pulled away, Seren looked back at Golden Bridge Plaza, once the pinnacle of Maverick's empire. Now, its mirrored towers stood as judgment stones. In her binder of evidence, Seren held not just photographs and documents, but the memory of Orion's bright smile. She whispered to the evening sky, "This is for you, my son. Your voice will be heard." And in that vow, Seren Vale Arden found strength to endure the battles ahead, certain that justice, once hidden, would now blaze across every screen in the city. The storm had passed, leaving the city washed clean and the air crisp with possibility. Seren Vale Arden found herself at the Iron Lotus Gym that evening, not as a bystander in a hospital gown, but in workout clothes, black leggings, a racerback tank, and her hair pulled into a tight braid. She'd agreed to meet Dr. Cale Arden for a casual sparring session, though neither of them knew exactly what that meant. The gym's interior was a haven of polished wood floors and mirrored walls dotted with martial arts weapons. Heavy bags swung gently from the ceiling. Instructors moved quietly between students, correcting stances. Seren's heart fluttered as she stepped onto the open mat near the center, her first real step into this world of discipline and precision. Cale appeared moments later, already warmed up in athletic shorts and a fitted tee that highlighted the line of his shoulders. He glanced at her with a small, respectful nod. "Ready," Seren swallowed. "As I'll ever be." They bowed to each other. Seren adopted a basic fighting stance, left foot forward, hands up to guard her face. Cale mirrored her, stepping forward with a light, practiced shuffle. The first exchange was tentative. Cale threw a slow front kick. Seren blocked it with her forearm, absorbing the impact. She felt the vibration through her bones, a sharp reminder she was alive. Their movements felt like a conversation, each jab and guard reply revealing more about the other. Cale feinted to the left, then swung a right hook. Seren pivoted, twisting her hips to redirect the force. She countered with a low kick that Cale barely deflected. The contact hummed through her leg, a thrilling pulse of power. They paused. "Not bad," Cale said, voice calm. "Where'd you learn that?" Seren's lips curved into a small smile. "Some private lessons after Orion's accident. My therapist recommended physical activity for stress relief." Cale nodded. "It shows." He pressed forward with a flurry of controlled strikes, a jab to the torso, a quick sidekick, then a hook aimed at her ribs. Seren blocked each blow, her breathing steady. She saw the respect in Cale's eyes, a glimmer of admiration that warmed her chest. She countered with a spinning back kick, her signature move practiced in solitude. The kick landed with a solid thud against Cale's guard. He staggered back an inch, surprised. "Impressive," he said, voice low. "Where did you learn that?" Seren shrugged, cheeks flushed. "You remember something, don't you?" Cale's gaze softened. "Maybe." They moved together in a rhythm, strike, block, pivot, each sequence growing faster, more fluid. Seren felt her confidence swell. For a moment, grief and fear fell away, leaving only the exhilarating clarity of movement. Then Cale shifted tactics. He feigned a low punch, only to sweep his leg toward her ankle. Seren hopped back, then lunged forward in a clinch. Their breath mingled, close and warm. Seren's pulse thundered in her ears. He released her with a gentle push. "Enough for tonight?" he asked, voice close. His eyes were earnest. No trace of the corporate battlefield or the courtroom drama. Seren lowered her guard, heart still racing. "Yeah, that was great." They collected water bottles at the edge of the mat. As Seren sipped, Kale handed her a clean towel. "You're a natural," he said quietly. "Not just at defense, but at letting go when you need to." Seren blinked. "Letting go?" Kale nodded. "You've carried so much pain. But here, right now, you moved with focus and freedom." He paused, searching her face. "Would you like to continue this conversation over dinner?" Seren's breath caught. The gym's ambient lighting glowed warmly in the evening dusk. She met Kale's hopeful gaze and felt something inside her shift. Gratitude, at least. Maybe hope. "I'd like that," she said. 20 minutes later, they were seated at Ember and Ash, a softly lit bistro around the corner. Seren's appetite was tempered by lingering nerves, Kale's by a gracious respect that made her feel safe. They ordered salmon and roasted vegetables for her, steak and sweet potatoes for him, sharing stories between bites. "So," Kale said, leaning forward, "what made you take up martial arts?" Seren exhaled. "After Orion, I felt powerless. Martial arts gave me a way to anchor myself, control over my own body when everything else was out of control." Kale's gaze was tender. "That makes sense."
"And now?"
"Now," Seren paused, choosing her words. "Now I feel alive. It reminds me I still have a future to fight for." He nodded. "I'm honored you let me spar and share dinner with you." A server placed their desserts. Rich chocolate mousse for Seren, creme brulee for Kale. Seren tasted hers, the sweetness vivid. "It's an honor," she replied softly, "to not be alone." Kale smiled, eyes warm. "We'll take this one step at a time." They left the restaurant under a canopy of stars and urban lights. As they stood on the curb, Seren's mind buzzed with possibilities. Kale slid his hand into hers. Seren felt a spark, a gentle electricity that promised something more than justice and revenge. It promised companionship and healing. In that quiet moment, Seren Vale Arden, once broken, once lost, found herself stepping toward a new destiny, one where her heart might learn to trust again. And beside her, Kale Arden walked in step, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, together. By the time the sun rose on Seren Vale Arden's third day in Nashville, the whirlwind of emotion and adrenaline left her both exhilarated and exhausted. It all began with a simple dinner at Ember and Ash, an invitation from Kale Arden that felt as natural as breathing. Yet in those brief hours, they discovered a connection so rare it defied logic. Spurting flames through scenery still raw with Seren's grief. That very morning, Kale appeared in Seren's living room, an unexpected bouquet of white lilies in one hand. His dark hair slightly mussed from sleep. His blue-green eyes held a gentle intensity. Seren, still in yoga pants and a loose tee, stared at him in surprised delight. "Good morning," Kale said softly, placing the flowers on her dining table. "I couldn't wait to see you." Seren's heart fluttered. "Kale, you didn't have to." "I know," he replied with a crooked grin. "But I wanted to." They sipped coffee on her balcony, watching early traffic and the Tennessee sun gild the horizon. Each pause in conversation carried unspoken possibilities. Seren felt a stirring she hadn't allowed herself in months: hope. By noon, they were at Seren's attorney Maya Chen's office, filing paperwork for Seren's will, estate, and a formal notarized power of attorney granting Kale the right to manage any joint property. Maya raised a single eyebrow at the sheer speed. "You two are moving faster than a bullet train," she teased as she stamped the final document. Seren blushed. We know," she said. Her fingers skimmed over Kale's name on the signature line. Maya exhaled. "Well, love, or whatever this is, certainly accelerates proceedings." As they left, Kale slipped his hand into hers. Seren glanced up at him, her breath catching. That afternoon, under the towering oaks of Willowhome Park, they took their next step. Cale had arranged for a private pavilion draped in white linens and soft fairy lights. Seren arrived to find a single pale rose on a small pedestal. Her chest tightened in anticipation. "Seren," Cale began, voice low and earnest, "I know we've only known each other a few days, but I can't imagine my life without you." He took her hands. "I never believed in love at first sight until I met you. Orion's memory binds me to you, but your strength and compassion have bound me further. Will you marry me?" Seren's eyes brimmed. Her lips trembled into a radiant smile. "Cale, yes." He slid a delicate platinum band onto her finger, etched inside with their shared mantra, "Together we rise." Seren's hand shook as she admired the ring. A flash of cameras greeted them as they emerged from the pavilion. Unbeknownst to Seren, Cale had invited only their closest circle, Lyra standing proudly to one side, Maya holding a small bouquet of daisies, and a handful of hospital colleagues cheering softly. They had turned 3 days of whirlwind romance into an impromptu engagement party. Lyra enveloped Seren in a tearful hug. "You two look perfect." Maya handed them champagne flutes. Seren raised her glass to Cale. "To the fastest engagement in Nashville history." She laughed through happy tears. He tapped his glass against hers. "And to a lifetime more," he added. As twilight fell, they stood hand in hand beneath twinkling lights, the world feeling impossibly bright and new. Passers-by applauded, and Seren felt a surge of warmth. 3 days ago, she had been a woman broken by loss. Today, she was a fiancée, forging an uncharted path with the man who had rescued her heart. That evening, Seren reflected on how swiftly life could turn. In 72 hours, she had unearthed her family's truth, confronted her past, and embraced a love that seemed destined. The engagement was a promise, not just of marriage, but of shared healing and hope. As Cale swept Seren into his arms and spun her beneath a canopy of lanterns, she closed her eyes, feeling safe for the first time. The future, once a jagged void, now gleamed with possibility. And though questions, legal battles, grieving for Orion awaited them, Seren knew she would face every challenge with Cale by her side. Together, they had turned tragedy into triumph, forging a love that burned brighter for its rapid, fierce birth. In those final moments of the day, Seren and Cale embraced beneath the stars, their hearts racing in unison. 3 days might seem reckless to the world, but for them, it was simply the right moment to commit, to leap, and to trust that love could indeed conquer everything. A week after their whirlwind engagement, Seren Vale Arden watched the weather alerts flash across her phone with growing alarm. Flash flood warning, citywide. The remnants of a late-summer tropical storm had stalled over Nashville, transforming streets into rivers and neighborhoods into islands. By midday, the Cumberland River had crested, its turbulent waters surging into low-lying districts. News helicopters circled overhead as emergency sirens wailed. Seren stood on her condo balcony, heart pounding, scanning the swollen cityscape. She switched off the coffee machine and grabbed her raincoat. If Cale Arden was on duty with the Nova Springs Special Operations Rescue Unit, he'd be right in the eye of this storm. Within minutes, she was at the Emergency Coordination Center, an impromptu command post in the convention hall beside Mercy Hospital. Rows of folding tables held laptops and radio equipment. Firefighters, paramedics, and volunteers milled about, donning high-visibility gear under fluorescent light. Seren spotted Lyra and Dr. Maya Chen arguing quietly over maps. She approached, breathless. "Where's Cale?" Seren asked. Lyra pointed toward a bank of monitors showing live stream feeds from rescue boats. "He was on the rooftop rescue team 5 minutes ago. They've already pulled 30 people to safety in the West End neighborhood." Maya added, "The river's unpredictability is making it a nightmare. We're shifting resources constantly." Seren's pulse quickened. "Can I see the feed?" Lyra led her to the screens. A small rescue boat bobbed on churning dark water beneath an overpass, its headlight beams cutting through torrential rain. At the bow stood Kale, lean and focused in his wet weather gear, shouting orders over the roar of rushing water. "Hold on tight," he cried into his radio. "We got a family trapped on the second floor, 2 adults and an infant." Seren held her breath. Kale edged the boat alongside a flooded townhouse, water pouring in through shattered windows. He reached over the rail, anchoring a secure strap around the rescue harness draped over the terrified father's arms. The mother, clutching a crying baby, shuffled forward. Kale guided them aboard one by one, directing the driver. "Good job," he said, voice steady despite the torrent. He turned back to the driver. "Next house is 2 blocks east. Water's almost up to the eaves." The boat lurched forward. Seren watched anxiously as Kale leaned back, steadying himself, his hat perched precariously on his head. Then, without warning, the current slammed the boat's side against a submerged fence post. The hull tipped violently, throwing Kale off balance. He tumbled into the dark water with a splash, harness and radio skidding away across the surface. The parents aboard screamed in panic. Lyra gasped, reaching for the intercom. "He's in the water." Seren felt her lungs seize. Waves of cold fear crashed through her. Maya's hand steadied her shoulder. "Stay here," the attorney murmured, heading toward the radio operators. Seren sprinted to the command desk. "Where dispatcher keyed a mic, this is field ops," a voice crackled. "We have a man overboard at sector west end, coordinates X-ray Bravo 2. Request immediate dive team." Seren stayed glued to the monitor. In the next feed, the boat circled away, searching the choppy water. Submerged streetlights flickered, casting ghostly beams through the murk. Seconds stretched into an eternity. Somewhere beneath the water's surface, Kale Arden fought for every breath. His rescue suit, waterlogged and heavy, pulled at his limbs as he surfaced, coughing. He kicked toward the boat's hull, reaching as a volunteer leaning over the rail extended a life ring. Before he could grab it, a second wave slammed him against the side, dislodging his grip. On the monitors, Seren saw the volunteer lean too far, nearly toppling in the opposite direction. Another rescuer lunged, grabbing Kale's belt and heaving him aboard in one powerful motion. He collapsed on the deck, shivering violently, water flooding his helmet's edge. A medic knelt beside him, cutting away his harness. Lyra and Maya arrived, flanking Seren as they watched. The boat driver guided them back to shore, where an ambulance idled with its doors open. Kale was lifted inside, the rescuers murmuring congratulations mingled with curses at the water's brutality. Seren's legs trembled. She barely registered being guided away from the screens as a paramedic led her toward the ambulance's side window. Inside, Kale lay on a stretcher, soaked head to toe. His normally crisp rescue uniform clung to him like wet parchment. His eyes opened when Seren's reflection appeared in the glass. He managed a tired, wry smile. "Nice to see you in one piece," he rasped, voice hoarse. Seren's breath caught. She knocked on the window and nuzzled her forehead to the cool glass. "Kale, oh my God, you're alive." The paramedic ushered Seren toward the hospital's ER bay. As Kale was wheeled inside, she followed, flanked by Lyra and Maya. Inside the trauma unit, nurses tackled drying him off, wrapping blankets around his shoulders. A doctor placed a stethoscope to his chest. "Hypothermia and mild concussion," the doctor said in a brisk, reassuring tone. "We'll warm him up. Check for deeper injuries, then you can see him." Seren rubbed her arms, still buzzing with adrenaline and relief. She sank into the hard plastic chair beside his bed once he was settled. Kale's teeth chattered as the blankets cocooned him. He closed his eyes, jaw clenched against pain. Moments later, a technician offered him a warm blanket and a piping hot cup of broth. Kale nodded, accepting the nourishment with gratitude. Seren guided the cup to his lips. He sipped, leaning back. "Thank you," he whispered, voice still rough. "For waiting." She clasped his hand, careful of the 4 lines snaking into his wrist. "I was terrified," she admitted. "Every second I thought." He squeezed her hand. "I know." His gaze held hers, steady and fierce. "I'd do it again. Saving lives, it's what I'm meant to do." Lyra entered with a soft knock. "Family meeting," she announced, nodding at Maya to stay outside. Seren and Kale exchanged a glance, commitment and love shining between them. Lyra joined Seren's side. "He's stable now. No fractures, just muscle strain. They'll keep him overnight for observation." Seren exhaled, relief flooding through her. That was too close. Kale managed a weak grin. "Nothing we can't handle." He winced as he shifted. Seren brushed a damp strand of hair from his forehead. "You're a hero," she whispered. He reached up, touching her hand. "Only because I'm not alone," he said, voice tender. That evening, as waves of rain still drummed against the windows, Seren and Lyra took turns sitting by Kale's bedside. Maya arranged legal papers for Seren's pressing corporate fight, but Seren barely noticed the details. Her heart was tethered to the man resting under the blankets. In the quiet lull, Seren realized that love was not just a rapid spark but a sustaining flame. Kale's bravery had saved countless lives and nearly cost him his own. Yet his first thought, his first word, had been Seren's name. And in that hospital room, as the storm raged outside, Seren found her resolve renewed. She would face every flood, every trial, beside him, steadfast in her devotion. Tomorrow they would fight in court and the boardroom. Tonight, she simply held his hand, grateful that destiny had brought them together, and that once again, love had proven stronger than any deluge. The steady beep of the ICU monitor was both lullaby and alarm as Seren Vale Arden settled into the hard plastic chair beside Kale Arden's bed. 10 days had passed since the flood rescue. 10 days of anxious watches through feverish nights and the haze of painkillers. But today, Kale's eyes opened fully, color clear beneath swollen lids, and he offered Seren a small, grateful smile. "Hey," he croaked, voice still rough from intubation days earlier. Seren leaned forward, brushing back damp strands of hair at his temple. "Hey, hero." Her heart swelled at the way his chin quivered in a half-grin. She pressed his hand. "How are you feeling?" He flexed his fingers. "Like I wrestled the Cumberland River and lost." His attempt at humor drew a tired laugh from Seren, but she knew each breath cost him effort. Over the next 10 days, Seren's world contracted to this single hospital room. She took turns sleeping in the recliner and pacing the corridor, slipping away at dawn to fetch coffee, returning with croissants or fresh fruit. The nurses began greeting her by name. The cleaning staff shared soft smiles. Night after night, she watched Kale's chest rise and fall, whispered stories to him of Orion's laugh and the Arden family lore, and read aloud the classic tales her grandparents once told her in Avalon's orphanage. On day 2, Kale was too weak to speak. Seren held his hand as the respiratory therapist adjusted his oxygen mask. She whispered, "You'll pull through. I promise." On day 4, Kale stirred enough to track her across the room. "Seren?" he whispered, eyes water-bright. "Thank you for not leaving." Seren leaned over the bedside rail. "I'm here. Always." That afternoon, Dr. Emmerich, fresh from Orion's case, made his rounds. "Your lineage must forgive you some bone-deep stubbornness," he said dryly. "You're a formidable pair." His gaze held Seren's a beat longer, respect and gentle amusement mingling in his eyes. For Seren, who'd once been powerless, that moment felt like reclaiming her agency. By day 6, Kale was cleared to sit up and eat. Seren guided a spoonful of broth to his lips with the focused care of a mother bird feeding her chick. Each swallow brought a flicker of color back to his cheeks. On day 8, Kale managed a shaky pivot onto a wheelchair. Seren sat next to him, pushing the chair through the ICU bay. Other patients' families offered nods of encouragement as they passed. Seren felt a fierce pride. This was the man who risked his life for strangers, now gathering his strength to face the world again. "Ready?" she asked as they reached the small garden terrace outside the ICU. Rain had lavished the city's greenery, leaving petals limp on the paving stones. Kale inhaled, a slow, determined breath. "Ready." he agreed. Seren wheeled him to a bench under an overhang where they could hear distant chirps of sparrows. For the first time since his rescue, Kale shed the mask and simply sat beside Seren, hand in hers. They talked of light things: the dog Seren planned to adopt, Lyra's new research project at Nova Springs, the bistro menu's latest seasonal soup. Each word was a balm, knitting back fragments of normalcy. On day 10, Kale was discharged, weak but steady, supported by crutches and Seren's unwavering arm. Outside the ICU doors, sunlight broke through heavy clouds in a sudden shaft of gold. Seren's eyes shimmered as she helped him into the passenger seat of her SUV. At home, they transformed Seren's living room into a recovery sanctuary, pillows fluffed in every corner, blankets stacked on the sofa, framed photos of Orion and family adorning the coffee table. That evening, Kale nestled back against the cushions as Seren brought him a plate of homemade chicken soup. He sipped slowly. "This is perfect," he said, voice thick with gratitude. Seren smiled, brushing a stray hair from his forehead. "You earned it." Over the next days, their routine wove love into every gesture. Each morning Seren prepared a hearty breakfast, scrambled eggs with herbs from their tiny balcony garden. Kale, in turn, read aloud from a battered copy of The Hobbit, his voice growing stronger with each chapter. They spent afternoons on slow walks around the neighborhood, Kale leaning on Seren's arm, both marveling at how rain-gleamed maple leaves promised a crisp autumn ahead. At night, they cuddled on the couch, streaming favorite comedies and stealing gentle kisses, eyes bright with the knowledge they'd survived the storm. One afternoon, Lyra and Maya popped by with paperwork for Seren's pending civil suit. Instead of tense negotiations, the group shared laughter as Seren recounted the story of Kale's river wrestling. Maya stood nearby, pen poised. Seren caught her eye and shook her head. "Not now," she said with a grin. "Tonight, we celebrate life." As twilight bled into deep indigo, Seren stepped onto the balcony, Kale beside her. The city lights twinkled, reflecting the stars above. He draped an arm around her shoulders. "Thank you," he whispered, "for saving me in every way." Seren rested her head against his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart. "We saved each other," she replied softly. In the 10 days that both healed and deepened their bond, Seren learned that nurturing love was its own form of strength. They had faced the fiercest currents: loss, danger, injustice, and emerged not broken, but more resilient, their hearts entwined. As the warm night air stirred the jasmine in their garden, Seren Vale Arden and Kale Arden embraced a future bright not just with promise, but with the unwavering knowledge that together they could weather any storm. The morning sun washed Aurora Hall in soft gold as Seren Vale Arden stepped into the bridal suite, heart fluttering like the delicate lace of her wedding gown. 10 months had passed since Orion's accident and the rapid-fire engagement that followed. In that time, she and Kale Arden had navigated grief, corporate battles, a near-tragic flood rescue, and the delicate rebuilding of trust and love. Today, under the canopy of cherry blossoms in full bloom, they would exchange vows and begin a new chapter together. Seren stood before the full-length mirror, taking in the sight of creamy satin draping her form. The gown's sweetheart neckline, crisscrossed with delicate crystal embroidery, reminded her of raindrops on the river. Her hair, once a practical braid for sparring, was now swept into an elegant updo, adorned with a single white lily, a tribute to the lilies Kale had offered on their 3rd morning together. Lyra and Maya Bustamante, Seren's attorney and cherished friend, bustled around her, smoothing the train and adjusting the bouquet of ivory roses, ranunculus, and wild teasel that Seren would carry to the altar. Lyra wiped a tear from Seren's cheek as she pinned the lily. "You look breathtaking," she whispered. Maya cleared her throat playfully. "Try to relax, bridezilla," she teased, slipping a pair of pearl earrings into Seren's ears. "Kale's waiting outside. Time to face your groom." Seren closed her eyes, inhaling the scent of lilies and rosewater. Her lips curved in a serene smile. "Let's do this," she murmured. Outside Aurora Hall's arched windows, the courtyard gleamed under a sky woven with wisps of cloud. Towering cherry trees formed a natural aisle, petals drifting in the breeze like soft snow. Chairs lined the path in rows of cream and gold, each seat holding family and friends gathered for the Arden Vale Union. Cale stood at the pavilion's edge, dressed in a charcoal gray tuxedo with a white rose boutonniere that matched Seren's bouquet. His jaw was set, eyes bright with emotion. Beside him, Councilmember Wallace, who had overseen the Golden Bridge hearing, smiled proudly. Seren stepped into the courtyard, breath catching at the sight of her groom. Cale turned slowly, hand over his heart, and his expression melted into a rich, awed smile. Seren halted a few feet away, the world narrowing to this perfect moment. Cale's voice cracked with joy. "Seren, you're unbelievable." Tears shimmered in Seren's eyes. "And you're everything I imagined and more." They met halfway, hands intertwining, each heartbeat echoing their promise. Around them, guests whispered in happy hushes. The first look was not just a meeting of eyes. It was the collision of two souls who had braved storms both literal and figurative, now ready to embark on their greatest journey yet. At precisely 4:05, Seren and Cale took their places beneath the pavilion draped in gauzy white. A string quartet perched on the porch played a lilting arrangement of Clair de Lune. Seren's father, Marcus Vale, whom she had reconnected with through her therapy sessions, stood to her left, his silver hair trembling in the breeze. To Cale's right was his best friend, Chief Bradley Monroe, in full fire rescue dress uniform. Councilmember Wallace stepped forward as officiant. He smiled warmly at the couple. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today in the presence of family, friends, and the city that witnessed their reconciliation, to celebrate the union of Seren Vale Arden and Cale Arden. Love brought them together. Love guided them here." With each vow, Seren and Cale's voices rang clear, unwavering. "Cale, Seren, from the moment I found you on that ledge, I knew my life would never be the same. You taught me strength born of compassion, resilience born of love. Today, I vow to protect you as fiercely as you have rescued my heart. I promise to stand by you through every storm, to honor your dreams, and to cherish you every moment for the rest of my days. Seren, Cale, you are my anchor and my wings. In grief, you carried me. In joy, you lift me. Today, I vow to be your sanctuary and your champion. I promise to laugh with you, support you, and build a family grounded in trust, kindness, and courage. Together, we will honor Orion's memory by living boldly and loving deeply." They exchanged rings, a platinum band for her. Inside etched Orion's light, and a matching band for him, inscribed "Together we rise." "By the power vested in me," Councilmember Wallace declared, "I now pronounce you husband and wife." He paused with a flourish of his gavel. "Cale, you may kiss your bride." As Cale lifted Seren's veil, the world held its breath. Their lips met in a tender, luminous kiss, an emblem of every trial they'd surmounted and every hope they embraced. Aurora Hall's grand ballroom awaited, draped in ivory drapes and soft gold uplighting. Long wooden tables bore centerpieces of cherry branches, white hydrangeas, and flickering lanterns. A curved bar offered signature cocktails, the Arden Spark, a melon pear cooler, and Seren Sunrise, a rosemary-infused mimosa. Cale and Seren entered to a chorus of applause, first dancing to an intimate, acoustic cover of "Stand By Me." Seren pressed her cheek to Cale's chest, feeling the steady rhythm of his heartbeat as they swayed. Toasts followed. Lyra, radiant in emerald green, recounted childhood adventures with Seren and Cale, her voice full of laughter and tears. Maya spoke next, praising Seren's tenacity and Cale's unwavering loyalty. Marcus Vale raised his glass, voice catching. "May your love shine as brightly as Orion's memory." Between dancing and dining on honey-glazed salmon, herb-crusted chicken, and truffled potato mille-feuille, Guests shared stories of Seren's fierce courtroom battle and Kale's floodwater heroism, each recounting Drew's smiles of pride from the newlyweds. At sunset, Seren and Kale slipped outside for a moment alone. The garden glowed with lanterns. Seren turned to Kale, eyes shining. "I feel like anything is possible." Kale brushed a petal from her cheek. "Because with you, it is." Aurora Hall's top-floor honeymoon suite awaited. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city skyline, a clawfoot tub draped in rose petals, and champagne chilling in a polished ice bucket. Seren slipped out of her dancing heels as Kale drew back the bedding, soft moonlight playing over the satin sheets. They paused at the threshold, renovative eyes meeting with unspoken anticipation. Seren's fingers traced the platinum band on Kale's finger. "We've fought for everything. Now it's time to build something just for us." Kale pulled her into a slow, heartfelt kiss. "Tomorrow, we begin as partners in every way." Inside, they shared whispered vows beyond the ceremonial ones, promises of morning coffees on the balcony, of tough conversations over late-night tea, of a home always open to love and healing. They spoke Orion's name with reverence, pledging to honor his spirit in every memory they created. At last, wrapped in each other's arms, Seren and Kale surrendered to the warmth of new beginnings. In the hush of the suite, the world outside Aurora Hall fell away, leaving only two hearts joined by renewal and hope. The next morning, Seren awoke before Kale, sunlight dancing across the bedspread. She slipped on a soft robe and carried a tray of fresh croissants, fruit, and steaming coffee to the balcony. Below, the city stirred to life, cars trickling along restored streets, pedestrians sipping coffee at corner cafes. Kale appeared, hair mussed and eyes alight with the contentment of a man at peace. Seren offered him the coffee, and he accepted with a gentle kiss to her temple. Together, they watched the sunrise gild the skyline, a symbol of their own fresh start. In the months to come, Seren would finalize Orion's memorial scholarship, dedicating it to fearless children of Nashville who dreamed of rebuilding broken worlds. Kale would expand his rescue unit's capacity, training new volunteers in swiftwater safety. Side by side, they would host community events in Aurora Hall's courtyard, turning the space that once marked Seren's courtroom victory into a beacon of hope and healing. And on quiet evenings, Seren would cradle her husband's hand, remembering the storm that nearly claimed them both, grateful that love's steadfast current had carried them through. Together, Seren Vale Arden and Kale Arden embraced their destiny, not as survivors of tragedy alone, but as architects of a future illuminated by compassion, resilience, and the unbreakable bonds of family. Their wedding day was not the end of a story, but the first page of the next volume, a story defined by courage in the face of loss, justice in the face of corruption, and a love that, once found, would never be surrendered. As the cherry blossoms drifted on the breeze, Seren and Kale descended the balcony steps, hand in hand, ready to write every new line together, forever rising, forever entwined. And that brings us to the end of today's story on TrueStory Vibes. Don't forget to leave a comment with a quote or moment that touched you the most. Your words give our team the motivation to keep creating more heartfelt stories. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you again soon.